We are going to the third panel now, and the objective of this talk is to talk about the learnings and the perspectives of the Bioeconomy Initiative. I'm going to ask Patricia to help me and close the door or to control the people who are coming in and out so you can get a coffee, but you can come back here because we have a huge debate now, and we would be happy to invite the next panel. And I want to invite Marcelo Furtado, principal at NatureFinance and head of sustainability at Itaúsa. Thank you for being with us, Marcelo. And I ask you for your patience for the names now and the positions. And it's a big table, and I hope it is an intense debate that we can dive deep in the financing bioeconomy in the G20 and the challenges and opportunities for the construction of an equitable and positive bioeconomy for the nature. As I already invited the moderator, inform you that we have our ambassador, André Corrêa do Lago, Secretary of Climate, Energy and Environment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But with us here, I invite the Subsecretary of Economic Development in the Ministry of Finance, Cristina Reis. I also invite Carina Pimenta, National Secretary of Bioeconomy. Let's see if the people are outside in the coffee break. So one more time, third time is a charm. Carina, welcome. I also invite Rodrigo Rollemberg, Secretary of Green Economy, Decarbonization and Bioindustry of the Ministry of Development, Industry, Trade and Services. Thank you. A small disclaimer, so let's see if Cristina is arriving. Moving on, I invite the Director of the Department of Theme Programs of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, Leandro Pedron. I had the information that he was here. Yes, you are here with us. Thank you, Leandro. Continuing this table, this panel, I also invite the Chief Director of Bioinnovation in the Department of Science and Innovation of the South Africa, Ben Durhan. Thank you for being with us. And the co-chair of the International Consultative Panel on Biodiversity Credits, Dame Amelia Fawcett. Welcome and thank you for being with us. I wish you a great panel. Marcelo, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. I'm going to give a tip. Do not turn off your microphones because magically when you are going to speak, it's going to work. Because if you turn off the microphone, it takes a little while to turn on and to turn back on. So good morning. Thank you everyone for being here. I want to thank those who are refraining from leaving to drink coffee. And I want to start this panel requesting a round of applause to what we managed to achieve 19 hours ago with the objectives of the high-level principles of bioeconomy in the G20. We're still missing the ambassador, André do Lago. Maybe when he arrives we can applaud again. But you were very important people for this to happen. And as it was said in the previous panel and in the opening ceremony, this innovation of the Brazilian government in putting this topic in the agenda was a bold move We didn't know if it would work. But one thing is to be bold, and the other thing is to be bold and deliver. And you don't do this alone, because you need to talk to the rest of the world, especially in the larger economies, the big economies in the world, and this makes it even more challenging. So having celebrated what we achieved, now we are in the phase of, okay, now what? Now what do we do with that? So in this first round here, I would kindly ask you, I will start from the representatives of the Brazilian government, and then I move to you. I want to hear from you, in your opinion, what was and what is the legacy that you would like to highlight from this victory? And how do you see the next step to implement this? So I will start with Carina. Okay, good morning everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I want to greet Marcelo and my colleagues from G20 because we are always sitting together for 1 year at the same panel, the same table, talking about the same. Ben had an important role in South Africa, and Amelia that spoke yesterday about biodiversity credits in the finance and the new innovations in finance. My colleagues from the Ministry of Development and Cristina, who is going to arrive later, and especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that had an important role. We cannot reduce the role of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in order to coordinate all these effects with different countries inside the government, and the result is concrete in one sheet of paper. When we published the bioeconomy strategy, we took 1 year to publish 2 pages. So it took 1 more year to publish this page of principles that was critical to build a consensus, a convergence strategy on how we are understanding this journey as one of the alternatives. Not the complete alternative, but one of the most important alternatives towards the ecological transformation and the objectives that we have. A point to stand out, especially from the Ministry of Environment, is that we understood that the bioeconomy strategy needed nationally and internationally to recognize clearly how this economy is going to be about and the perspective of the production systems and the use of biodiversity, the different roles of the ecosystems, the productive systems, and these could be comprehensive to different sectors. There is no bioeconomy sector. It is a strategy that permeates different sectors. So I think we were really successful in G20 while putting this discussion forward that was not as present as you would like in the international forums, and here in Brazil it pushed a lot the domestic policies of what we are looking. So it is a major achievement. This is only one step that we are taking. In 1 month, in 2 months, we have COP in Cali of biodiversity, and there is a document to say, yes, we understand that bioeconomy depends on this, especially in the Montreal Agreement, the productive systems, the recognition that science is not only technological science. It's not only the science of researchers, but it is the science of traditional knowledge. It is the science of ancestrality. And all this comprises how we are going to think about the economy of the future. So these are important elements, and I believe the proximity with science and technology has been an advance, so we can put the mechanisms at the service of this bioeconomy that is not always present, and many times we do not understand how much biodiversity or the nature is present in the economic process that we have. So I would say that this was the leap that we took to implement. There are important agendas. You asked about the next steps? Okay, later we talked about the next steps. I'll pass the floor now to Rollemberg to tell us about the legacy that you see. Thank you, Marcelo. Good morning, everyone. I really want to thank the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure to be with my colleagues from the government, with my foreign guests here. They were very important in the G20 meeting. I believe this is an important legacy, this declaration of principles, and my expectation is that this can contribute to intensify the international trade and at the same time reducing or removing commercial barriers that many times were senseless. It is very clear to me that the economy is indispensable for the future of food security and uh, energy security and climate security of the planet. We have a lot of challenges. We will have the opportunity to talk about them later. At the same time, we have a lot of opportunities, but I understand that being in a declaration signed by the countries that are responsible for 80% of the worldwide economy is an extremely important step to intensify the cooperation. I have always said that the planet is not giving more signs, it's giving evidences that we either change the way we produce and consume, or all of us will move towards a cliff. And it is critical that everyone can understand that we have to change competition between countries, many times unloyal competition, a competition that fierces the inequalities in the world, for a cooperation, a permanent cooperation. And I understand that this declaration takes an initial step towards increasing the cooperation in favor of bioeconomy.
So welcome, Cristina. We have a round table here. And what is, in your opinion, the best legacy following the principle of economy in the G20? Just for Cristina to think about their answer, I just would like you to put your final considerations, please. Well, welcome, Christina, and all of you. Good morning for other people here. Thank you, and all the integrants of this panel. So we are coming from a long time sitting at the same table. So it's another pleasure here to, yeah, yeah, closer. Okay. So we have here more information that South Africa will be part of our group, which gives us a response of our legacy. So, the perspective of the Ministry of Technology and Science, we have to understand the continuation of of the agenda of much more than what we have been doing. What the ministry have worked about the bioeconomy, we are working on this for 8 years, and this bioeconomy are part of our strategy. We have an action plan very specific to this area, and we are talking here about a Brazilian contest of the national system of technology. And when we have this debate and we take this to the other forums and we have the participation of some other players such as MMA and Majiki, we must also understand as a legacy the importance of the translation of this and what was debated and approved yesterday. We have some two specific terms approved referring to science, and this comes together with the challenges that we will be facing in the G20 meeting. We have all the difficulties and challenges of the sustainable development and the difficulty of managing the data and also to deal with this data. A complement of what the minister said, I believe that the first step to continue the agenda that was discussed is the cooperation of the scientific terms. We have the same problems as well, and I believe that in the principle 8, if I'm not mistaken, we have to use this in a better way and to overcome these challenges. So the legacy that will be left here is what was reflected inside the principles, and this is something that we must overcome. So the first answer is this: the legacy is that we will be able to be inside of a new theme. There is a new paradigm, and it's a new challenge for us. We have to think about surfacing this and considering a group work. It's really clear for us in the G20 meeting. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Ambassador Corrêa do Lago. Welcome. Just to keep you up with what's happening here, we have a panel here and answering the question. In your opinion, what will be the legacy that we have here in the adoption of the bioeconomy principles in the G20? Carina Pimenta talked about the environmental politics and the vision of the financial area regarding to this, and Cristina will talk a little bit about further details, and then we'll have your final answer. But I was really anxious to have this complete panel so as you may have the opportunity to know what the audience must know about 19 hours ago what happened. I believe we may have a sort of applause because of this result. So we would like you to receive this as a prize. We know that it's not easy. Sometimes it's hard to work and you don't receive the proper credits for this. And we must celebrate not only as Brazilians but also as citizens of this planet. So please, thank you. I confess that I'm still celebrating this because it was really cool what happened yesterday. We worked a lot for this to happen. I know that many people here that are listening to us worked a lot, and they probably are very happy for what happened yesterday. These 10 principles that goes through diverse themes about the financial, social, and technological areas, the environmental, the protection of the intellectual properties, and the knowledge, the traditional knowledge, cooperation, and many of them. So we are working in 1 year in this project and bringing a theme that wasn't treated this way in the G20 meeting, and to take this meeting out without presuming this into a closed concepts, because we know that every single country has their objective. So that's why I can tell you that I'm very happy and still celebrating this. We understand that the legacy of this is bringing a dream that's becoming true about the countries in development to work with this sustainable development that generates revenues for the population of these countries, and also that we preserve some areas of this country, such as the biofuels here in Brazil, for example, to bring more justice to this department and to know how to deal with the climate changes. And Marcelo can see you from here. Thank you very much. It's very important, the agenda that you are working on. And this is a group work that we are starting right now with a very positive sense of group, and I'd like to say at this moment that it's a very rare moment in our history. It was really cool. Thank you very much. In the opening of this panel about the group work, I just would like to say that it was an enormous pleasure to work with 21 organizations of the Brazilian society that supported this initiative. And something that I would like to highlight here is that we had some companies such as Furtado and some other ones working with coming from very different places in the society, but all of them equally important. I believe what happened in that room was happening outside of that room. So I just would like to have the opportunity to say that to you. And we know that we have worked very hard, and all the ones who are here know that the ambassador here worked a lot with this. So please, can you tell us your experience? Thank you, Marcelo. I'm really happy to be here with all of this team, and Bella which will continue uh, with this effort. I believe that it's worth it to comment that when we're talking about the bioeconomy and the G20, the first thing we had to know is that if the government was okay with that infrastructure, and then we invited the other ministries as well just to debate about this theme and to know what they thought about this idea. And we had 15 ministries. BNDS was inside of this group, and in 2 meetings we all were in a common agreement, and we started very well because we could see that inside of the government we had that diversity that instead of complicating the economy, it turned this economy into something really more interesting. And to know, to have contact with some traditional knowledge, with high technologies, with the same enthusiastic environment as we had previously, and all of them had something in common. They knew that there was an advantage here that was one of the major interests of Brazil. So this initiative of the bioeconomy in the G20 was really well received in the beginning, but overall we could have the first role that is sent to the other countries to check if the idea was kind of being approved, because it was well defined at the beginning. We know that some of the countries that are part of the G20 do not have any structure about this, so we had a lot of barriers regarding to this innovative perspective. But regarding to this idea, we prepared this in a group work, and it was very well received. And then we had the second stage where Marcelo has worked with us, referring to how the private sector and the academy and all the social the society accepted this debate and would participate into this debate. So it was really good to receive this group, and as you said, it was a very effective result that we had. And also this debate here that is very important here to talk about the financial part of the economy. So we had this first stage, which was very important to try to implement these principles, because they will create new standards of how we will debate this bioeconomy issue in the future. And even considering that we had this previous discussion about some international partners, that would be such as one minister was talking alone about this, when the wellness of the bioeconomy is this diversity. So taking this out of G20, we have such a diversity here, such as Saudi Arabia and some other countries. Each one of them have their different position and different benefits. So this collection of differences was responsible for our meeting. But I believe that, my friend, here we have a lot of work to do, because the next stages would really match one with the other. A lot of people wanted to have more definitions. I believe the structures are done, and the South Africa, which is incredible and diverse, such as Brazil, will be able to lead the second stage of the project in a way that will strengthen the wellness and the biodiversity of this debate. And I have to be clear here, and I won't accept all the credits here from me, because we had a group work here, and all of his team coordinating with some other ministries. I believe it was a project that was really well done, and with a very good behavior and a good result. We had some terrible stories, but I cannot tell you that right now. But in the end, we had all of this worked out well. And thank you, Marcelo, for coordinating this and for bringing so many other elements that will strengthen this discussion here. And I believe that with this South Africa, we will succeed in the future. So, Ben, what was really interesting in this conversation is that all of us are sure that the South Africa will carry the bioeconomy for the G20, and we can see that we have lots of supports here, as you can see by the audience. So I will skip the question about the legacy that I did to the representatives of Brazil, and I'll go straight for this final question, that is, what is, in your opinion, the more valuable thing here in Brazil to a vision of the construction of the next step in the South Africa? And also considering this vision, if you believe that you can give us a further information of how you see this new perspective of the South Africa with the continuity of this exercise, I believe it would be really interesting, because instead of being in an incredible panel, I would like to tell you that even here or in the other rooms, and considering the online audience, I can say that we have the most important representatives here. So it's a very important audience here that are able to help us and also South Africa in the future.
Great. Thank you very much, Marcelo. Thanks to my fellow panelists, and good morning, if it's still morning, to everyone. A couple of points that I want to make in responding to Marcelo. This initiative is responding to the global crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. It's the explanation why we are all here together and why we are working together. And a second point is, I want to note the incredible achievement that Brazil has made in taking this first step. It wasn't the situation where it was just put your foot forward and take that first step. This was designing an entire process with a vision that could bring the countries together. I don't know if you can hear me. Bring the countries together in forming a unified approach to the importance of what needs to be done. So Brazil has not set the precise targets in the way forward, but it has taken the most important step, which is to get agreement on what we are talking about and the focus of the attention. So these high-level principles is really a significant achievement on the global stage. The third point is Brazil has set an incredibly high standard in taking this issue forward. The work that has gone on behind the scenes, not only in Brazil, but in getting all the ministries and everyone together into this this team that drove this forward, but taking the whole world along with it. So the thought leadership that has been demonstrated here by Brazil is second to none in the world. And congratulations to Brazil for taking this first step. And then congratulations to everyone, including the people on this panel, for actually finally agreeing yesterday, as we have mentioned several times, agreeing to the high-level principles. So now we know what we're talking about. We know what is the scope of attention, and the heavy burden, but fortunately with clarity in the way forward, has been handed to South Africa, and we have a bioeconomy strategy. This fits in very well with what we want nationally, but we are part of Africa, and we see the bioeconomy as having a huge role to play in Africa, because particularly in the equatorial region, there are significant biomass reserves. But as Simon mentioned in an earlier panel, we can't just encourage economic development, because agriculture can have negative consequences for biodiversity, for climate change. We need to be quite selective and clear, and the principles then do help us in making sure what we want to do. The fourth, I forget which point we're on to now, is that there are a plethora of multilateral organizations, conferences, events, and so on, which are all talking about climate change and biodiversity loss and the importance, and trying to galvanize funds to do the right thing. In my view, the bioeconomy is the one that is going to pull these all together, because it is based on financial sustainability. It's business that we need to develop. Yes, we need to absolutely be sure that this is delivering services to the people, and yes, we need to make sure that this has a profound positive impact on the environment, but this is a sustainable enterprise, or sorry, it has the potential to be a sustainable enterprise because it is based on economic principles. So while everyone else is talking about doing good, I believe the bioeconomy has the edge. We are actually going to be able to bring about change. A point to note then in terms of South Africa's thinking for next year, we firstly would like to unpack the principles that have been developed so that we can measure the interventions that are made, so that we know whether we are doing the right thing in this bioeconomy initiative, or how to steer it and guide it. So we need to have a look at these principles and look at metrics and standards that can guide this further work. The second key point that we are wanting to take, and this is harnessing the leadership that Brazil has shown, is by developing a platform. And I know that's a very broad term which means different things to different people, but the thinking needs to develop during our presidency next year, where a platform is created that can provide targeted bioeconomy interventions for the global south. Obviously, South Africa, being in Africa, we are focusing particularly on African needs and African opportunities. And if we look at the state of development in Africa, it varies quite dramatically. But there are huge opportunities now for doing this, but we're lacking the skills and we're lacking the science infrastructure. So we have a range of interventions that we are wanting to pursue. I think the last point that I will end up with is a point that South Africa feels very strongly about. It is not enough that wealthy nations that can afford to develop a bioeconomy pursue it without taking the rest of the world along with it. It's the whole world that needs to respond to climate change, to biodiversity loss. We can't just have a few nations that do it. It is a responsibility of the whole world to develop a bioeconomy approach, and we need to recognize that this is a new paradigm. We're not really talking about it yet, but I suspect there is going to be a period of belt tightening, because changing from a non-sustainable, exploitative economic system in the world to one that is responsible and sustainable across the dimensions of social, economic, and environmental is going to be painful. We need to make it as least painful as possible, and we need to apply our minds across the world to do that. But this is a dramatic change, and the change alone is going to be painful, but I suspect there are more challenges ahead of us. So just to summarize then, what we are doing is unpacking the principles so that any future bioeconomy developments will be guided by these principles that the world now through this G20 initiative have agreed to. And secondly, designing a platform that can intervene across the global south to create bioeconomy initiatives that build skills, that build economic opportunity, that build wealth, but not at the expense of the environment or of the people of that country. Thank you.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you. And the point that you highlight of a positive bioeconomy for the climate, nature, and people was the meeting point where the 21 organizations that supported this initiative of society have found each other. So I confess that we found more easily to find evidence on how to do this positive job for the climate and for the nature. The equity part was more difficult because there are little evidences and little studies and little public policies and little actions. So maybe this could be a point for you to consider, and this is a point that needs to be standing out for. It is relevant for the whole world, but especially for South Africa. And Africa, it would be legitimate to take this conversation forward. Amelie, now back to you. You have so much experience in so many things that I need to see if I can focus on the fact that in this panel, certainly you are a person that has a close contact with the finance sector. And the big question is, okay, now we have the principles, we have this international framework already established. How can we lend this to the financial sector in a way that's something that was, it's not criticized, but something that was questioned during the process, is that the principles were still pretty vague and people were seeking things that are more operational. But I believe, Ben, this will be a pressure to South Africa, so let's operationalize each one of these principles. So you can answer whatever you want, of course. But if you could include these aspects, I believe to us your experience leading this sector in Europe would be important to hear.
First, I have to say, if you look at this panel, I am a fish out of water. But I will do my best I can to live up to their excellent contributions. And Ben, I have to say, I'm glad I'm not in your shoes. No pressure from this organization for what you're going to do next. Marcelo, I was thinking about the legacy of Brazil because it actually underpins the answer to your question. So there were 5 things I thought about when I read the excellent report and have thought a great deal about what Brazil has done over the last few years. 1, bringing together finance and the environment in an integrated way that's really never been done before. So if you are in markets, the reason some of these other markets have not developed well is because they treated them separately or didn't even consider half the equation. That is absolutely impossible for the development of high-integrity markets. That's the first thing. Second thing, the focus on local and global. At my old shop at Morgan Stanley, we used to call it glocal. You need to address both the needs and requirements and opportunities in a local market, but they need also to link into and be carried forward at a global level. And I think Brazil has done that brilliantly. Third, the idea of high-level principles, global standards, global principles. If you take the carbon markets, what is the one thing investors have told us as I travel the globe dealing with biodiversity credits and how we develop high-integrity markets? What do they need? They need principles. They need a regulated market, however you define that. So I think the focus on principles, and I can explain it later on, is fundamental to engendering confidence and unlocking private and public sector capital for nature and the planet, and people on the planet. The fourth is the importance of indigenous people and local communities. Not as people to think about or to be consulted, but to be a fundamental part of how you develop these markets, to be a fundamental part and take the lead in projects that we're going to finance, and all the ramifications of that in terms of benefit sharing, stewardship, and other things. And the last thing I would say is the other thing Brazil has done that we all need to do is act to be bold, have great ambition, and deliver. So Mariana and Simon are both here on the panel, but what Mariana is always telling us, stop the words, stop the pledges. Let's operationalize this and start getting money moving into these projects and these communities as quickly as we can. So at the panel, besides principles, we have recommendations, guidelines, and pilots. And then the last thing we will do as part of this number 5 is we need a coalition of governments, multilateral development banks, private sector, international financial organizations, NGOs, who will say, yes, this is our best chance now to create high integrity markets that can deliver for people on the planet. And the day after Cali, that large group of people is going to have to take this platform forward. But I think they can, and in the spirit of Brazil, I think they will.
Eu vou aproveitar essa
I'm going
deixa
to
que você fez
take this lead
André,
and
direto para você,
go to André
porque
directly,
próximo
because the next big opportunity that we have to construct here in Brazil, to continue this conversation and to transform into a concrete action, is our preparation to COP30. I want to remind you that COP30 is not an event that takes place only in November of 2025. COP30 is a process that Brazil is leading by 2026 in November, when it delivers the presidency to the next country that will host the next COP. So we are not talking about something that we will do by November 2025. This is something that we are doing by 2026 on. So since we were successful not only here, it's worth mentioning that in the working group of sustainable finances, the Brazilian leadership managed to complete an ambitious agenda as well. And right now, Brazil is leading the climate task force that we hope that we'll have good results there as well. And you put a pressure and open a precedent, and those who are negotiating are being pressured to deliver something good as well. So Ambassador André, if you could talk about your views on the opportunities of connection of what is coming out of the G20, of what is going to COP30. Thank you, Marcelo. I think we can try to associate and explain how Brazil is trying to associate all of these events that you mentioned. But we have to start with the first one. That was the meeting of the head of states in Belém of the Amazon countries. I believe everything starts there. Because we realized that since we are presiding COP30 and the president decided that it would be a COP in the Amazon, so it will be in the Belém, so Brazil somehow is taking the leading of hosting a COP in a place that symbolizes the worst contribution to the worldwide emissions. That is the deforestation. So somehow Brazil is assuming not only a defensive position, but it is a country that has the awareness that the climate change will be a disaster. And it will be a disaster to Brazil, a disaster to the most poor, a disaster to all of these projects of development that my generation believed and tried to create. that we could use all of these steps to be able to create something coherent. So we start with this thing in Belém, and the meeting in Belém had not only the declaration of the countries of the Amazon, but also there was a declaration of forest countries that also participated in the meeting. There were two Congos, Indonesia, and San Vicente and Grenadines, and other countries for different reasons. But from this declaration of the Amazon countries, we decided to increase this and transform this into a country with developments for rainforest. So believe it or not, there are more than 70. So we are trying to gather the biggest number of countries around this declaration that is called United by the Forest. The idea is to debate among these countries, these forest countries, what are the real alternatives that are being presented to the development of these countries that has rainforests. And I will join to what was just said, because it is not only the climate dimension, but also the biodiversity dimension, and of course the local communities and indigenous people, and economic solutions, as Ben mentioned, that make these regions richer, because it is an absurd, because at the same time they are seen as very rich, and we know unfortunately in Brazil that the states of the Amazon region has the worst social indexes in the country. So the model definitely didn't work. And we have this experience in Brazil that the problem of Amapá and Acre and the Amazon are different from each Amazon state. And Marcelo here, that he can talk about this better than me. And each one of these states somehow reflect what each one of these tropical countries want. Some of them deforested more, some of them deforested less, they have less or more the biodiversity. So the discussion of bioeconomy was essential to fit into these logics. That is to start working, focusing on the urgencies and beyond the official negotiations of the United Nations. Since I work with these negotiations for a long time, and I believe they were extremely essential, at the same time they create a structure that is locked for some progresses, some quick progresses. And the urgencies oblige us to find different alternatives. So G20, we are trying to use in this regard. The Task Force for Climate was a way to join the finance sector with the environment in a truly constructive manner, in a way that there could be new steps taken forward. So in the climate convention, even if the NCQD that we are going to negotiate, that is the new version of the 100 billions a year, even if it is successful, we already know that we need trillions. And these trillions are not going to appear in the NSTQ. So we are in the G20 working outside of the UNFCCC, because the G20 does not have legitimacy to make decisions with a negotiation with 196 countries. So G20 has to find what they can do more, because it is 80% of the GDP and 80% of the emissions, so there is a responsibility. So all of these things can fit together for the preparation for COP30. And the good news is that these trillions, they exist. This is not new money. You just need to allocate them better, looking what is priority for society. So it is an important reading to be made. Now I heard from a negotiator that this G20 experience for Brazil was really positive, especially to see how this would reflect in the national domestic policies. It was not Carina. Carina is looking at me, but it's not you who said that. But if you agree that this is true, What I wanted to say is that since we have a new moment, and this moment with this frame, and Brazil, and you in particular, responsible for establishing this national policy of bioeconomy, how do you see the challenge of this implementation inside Brazil in terms of opportunities and maybe main barriers, taking the opportunity that we have important people in the audience that is going to help us unlock this? I was thinking about the people that we can see in the front row here. Certainly. Well, I I thought that the discussion in the G20 nourished our discussions here. So I think it was a two-way street in the consensus that we had in the ministries from the leadership of the G20 perspective. It's not because we already had an agreement, but the establishment of a communication among different ministries of what would be bioeconomy, what was being worked before the government and the society was building, and the expectations were happening in parallel. So when we reached the presidency in December, we had more than 16 and 17 ministries involved, including the Commission of Bioeconomy that is going to be launched soon. So there is an important role of the Ministry of Environment, and we have the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Development with a rotational political commission with this integrated look inside the policy, and there will be 17 ministers in total. Besides these 17 ministers, we'll have representations from the society, and these are the main challenges, I think. If we look at the principles that are in the strategy of bioeconomy, in the high-level principles, we are going to observe that there is a coherence between them. It is interesting to see that we benefit and we learned together. It was easier to build principles in Brazil and discuss this internationally. There are some developments of what is country-specific that is important to Brazil, and we want to focus. So when you look at the national strategy, and there is the second objective specifically to Brazil, the forest economies related to social biodiversity is the objective of the policy, as to increase the competitiveness of different sectors from the systems of production. So we are bringing some elements that are going to underpin these guidelines, and I believe this would be the focus of the work that needs to be done with multiple sectors. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to agree on the goals of the policies. We have talked about them, but unfolding them in the national plan will be the opportunity to create this consensus that we are working in the G20 to translate them into a concept. So what is the first cycle of bioeconomy development in Brazil? The ones that we have important benefits in sectors that has a lot of development accumulated, and the new sectors that need to emerge, because the bioeconomy policy has to look forward. It is a transformation. It is a process. We have to envision the future, not only the short-term gain, because it can inhibit, and we saw that in many different policies in climate and biodiversity, that sometimes we cannot see in the short term, and if this is going to block our capacity in the future. So there are some questions that we have to ask ourselves. Brazil wants to be a big power in bioeconomy with the knowledge of biodiversity. What are the instruments? How this is going to permeate in the industry? What are the sectors that will be involved? How are you going to work in supporting the agriculture in this transition and this transformation, so this cannot be a commercial barrier? So these are concrete questions that we have to debate in our commission and many others. But I believe there is a big opportunity, because it's really clear that in the ecological transformation plan, and Cristina is going to talk about the finance instruments later, we need to make a choice. We're not going to fund everyone and finance everyone. But inside bioeconomy, we have to make some choices. I believe these will be the best parts. So I need to compliment Ben here, because this process that will take place in South Africa, I believe it will continue to remain this discussion alive in the international forums. I think this will be critical. And the participation that you had in the construction, to look at the next steps, to the enterprise and the business, and to land in these platforms, will be very important to talk to the national strategy, because this will bring more visibility and international discussion and bring new ways of cooperation through G20 and other international forums that we can unfold these principles, and there are many different options. Thank you. Well, hearing Carina and Amelie that talks about that the markets require scale. Rollemberg, now this is now the ball is on your court. How the Brazilian industry and the Brazilian trade is going to integrate to this future in this bioeconomy. Most of it's already happening. It's not that we are reinventing something new. When you talk about scale or microeconomy, the first question is what bioeconomy we are talking about. And we have challenges and opportunities that are really different. For example, when you talk about social bioeconomy in the Amazon, we have a gigantic challenge of logistics. You can imagine right now as we speak, with the droughts of rivers, a community producing acai or something, how they can flow their production without the rivers. So in the debate of bioeconomy, that's why it's important to have a lot of ministries. The logistics issue, the energy issue, and connectivity, this is absolutely indispensable to gain scale. On the other hand, it worries me, the financial sector, because the social bioeconomy sector does not have a financial return that is significant. So maybe this will make it even more difficult to attract investments, besides being communities with different to provide guarantees as the banks provide. So we will need to modify the business model for these communities. It will be totally indispensable for gain scale.
And then we have a cultural problem, because nowadays one very important factor in the bioeconomy is the public sector. And we have the culture now of some processed food, because Amazon did not produce this kind of things. And we are here monitoring this kind of foods, and to transport this kind of food we have to do this in some vehicles that are has as important fuels the diesel. If this actual government did not approve this new methodology, if these producers, since the January the 1st, they will be in an illegal operation. And we are talking here about the 4th country in the world that produces food like that. And we are extremely dependent of chemical issues, and we have the possibility to use the bioenzymes and to promote a decarbonization of our agriculture. I just would like to remind you that this was a very important researcher that developed this technology, where we are saving billions of reals and because we don't have to use this kind of materials, and we are not emitting a lot of pollution in the air. So if we are talking now about a bioeconomy to produce biofuel, for example, it's all very well structured, because yes, with the approval of this future fuel, we could say that since 2027 we will have an authorization to use SAF as fuel for the aviation department, and this will be held until 2037. And Brazil had a presentation from a researcher of USP. We have 5% of our areas, and we have to duplicate the production of biofuels. So with this we have diverse situations and many different opportunities. We have to focus on where we need, and the Amazon must have a very specific look into the philanthropies, because of the importance that Amazon have, considering the other biomas from Brazil, and for the planet as well, for the climate security, and Brazil must also take these opportunities because we know a lot about production of biofuels. I gotta make it clear because I talked to Carina previously that to have this financial support, it's very important to have some clear criteria. It must be in some of these areas that are really needing our help to use this methodology of biofuels. Thank you for your participation once again. I noticed that a very interesting situation in the negotiation, and it was the participation of China in that meeting was from a representative of the technological sector, and from India was from a biotechnology, and the one from Brazil, we had a representative of the science and technology representing Brazil, in this case you. So we can see that we may imagine, considering all the sectors involved in this environment, maybe this would be a representative from Europe or United States, but it wasn't. It was these countries that I've mentioned. They are really rich in nature, considering their nature. So how is Brazil considering this connection of bioeconomy with technology? Well, not only watching but also working on it. We have been debating this for a long time, and we are doing this in a practical way. We have some situations here in Brazil that are alike to these international issues, and through the biodiversity of our country, we have an industry sector focused in technology, and what is really happening is that we are very aligned with what the Secretary Carina commented. We have to have new decisions focusing on this target. We are trying to solve this problem, so the science must be a new direction to deliver the answers based in the restrictions of our country, which saying about our interests, and to have a direct connection with all the principles from what was mentioned yesterday. We must have an structured procedure to deliver this. And when we're talking about science and technology, these are some huge barriers that we have to be worried about. Resources and science and technology for the innovations, because we have a new thing here, because this innovation will open new markets. We will need new metrics, very well developed, and we must have some human resources. That is the second point that is important in the infrastructure. And what is the difference of what we already have are the references of biofuels. We have the capacity to not use the new areas, and we have the capacity to triple the number of what we have as a result in a partnership with some other countries. So the science will deliver this. What we are thinking about the connection between biotechnology and bioeconomy, that must have an alignment that for us is an opportunity. We will be directly focused in assuring the human resources, the infrastructures, and to make it really happen. So the position of Brazil is really strong, and we can see that it's very well directed in bringing these limits, creating these limits. We can see that we have the specific needs to overcome these challenges that we have in the future. Okay, thank you. Cristina, please. We have heard a lot about a reflection of this positive environment for the bioeconomy, not only in Brazil but in a worldwide perspective. About the minister considering the perspective as a regulatory department is it like a place that can bring new directions to the private and public companies? We know that they have a very important role in this scenario, but in a recent past, we know that they usually didn't talk about this, and we can see that we have lots of expectations of what will be the next steps of the ministry. So can you tell us what will be the next steps? Yes, thank you. Well, we can see that we have a consistency speech regarding to the sustainable goals, and our ministry could not be out of this scenario. We are considering that this climate crisis that we are facing right now is a priority that must and will be faced, considering some economical tools generating jobs and generating revenues, as she said previously. And for that, we must start this new process in a very strong way. So we must protect our ecological departments, and also we started this idea from a new assessment, and a special assessment that was designed to think about this plan, and our subsecretary that is taking care of this, they have this mission to have this step forward of this project, and we are getting more and more importance on this project. Today we have a bigger team working on it, and they structured this in 6 points, and one of them is the bioeconomy and the systems that fits this idea. The other are the infrastructure of the adaptation, energetic transition, the circular energy, and the sustainable finances. And about this last one, I believe that has all to do with what we're talking here about, all the panels that we'll have. I can tell you that there are some tools that the government can provide regarding to regulations and taxes, and much more than evaluation and monitoring the activities. So that for that we are following different ways to bring this bioeconomy and also to have this structural transformation. And what is exactly that? This is something that brings more in a better way what will happen in every single area of our territory. So we have natural resources and some other issues that are really important for this transformation, but it's not only to explore this without thinking of how this will assure the sustainability of this group of dynamic elements. So for these tools, we have the emission of the sustainable titles, and we also have the monitoring of the sustainable procedures, and for that we have some specific procedures. We also have the international funds of the forests, like Forever, the tropical forests, which is the TFF. We have the Eco Invest, and we also have the regulation of the carbon market, which is important because back in the days we had the regulations together with the strategy of the bioeconomy, that we have a chamber with the financial structures and all the sponsors of these activities, and also to regulate this activity. And we also have the taxonomy, the sustainable taxonomy from Brazil. This will bring new standards for this new activity, which is a sustainable activity. And this will create a biodiversity criteria for the posterior action. So I give you some examples here that our government are working on to bring a new structure for this new reality. We are talking here about trillions of investment, and we have a new economical infrastructure that are favorable for this to happen. Well, thank you. And this macroeconomical environment, we don't have control on that, but are you working on a dimension of watching this and to work with the biodiversity credits that matches with the finance of the bioeconomy. And there's always the same question coming in. Are we working with the demand of the bioeconomy with the speed credits, one of them? Here we are talking a lot about offers. So, can you talk a little about the demands that we have?
And drivers, or who is paying for?
Right, okay, got it. I'm not. Well, maybe part of my bonus will, I'm not sure. But I work for myself, so it's a zero bonus. So there's no question that innovative financing and biocredits are one of them, can help in the financing of the bioeconomy. The trick that we have to play is learn from the carbon markets and realize that this is not a global fungible market. It is more like infrastructure finance or project finance. And as a result, what that interestingly tells you, and I think when we started looking at biocredits just as one innovative instrument of many that you'll need in the bioeconomy, and I would hope the work that we're doing would shed some light on some of those other instruments, i.e. that they are applicable beyond just the biodiversity credit market. So what we clearly are what we discovered, and having originally thought, oh, this is a financial services market initiative, what we discovered actually is that it is a fundamental way to finance the large corporations, small corporations, and sectors to help them do the transition to net zero and net positive. That's a big change in how you start to think about these things. There is demand. There are some as I sort of tried to quickly highlight, there are a variety of different market models that you could use where we do believe there is serious demand. It could be insetting. Nestle wants to secure its cocoa production in one of your countries. So insetting, but there is a real demand for that. Voluntary for different kinds of targets. Compliance, contribution. But the underlying message we keep hearing from people is we have an interest, we've been burned before, or we know people who have been burned before, and if you want us to enter into size, there are a few things we're going to need. One, there is a big role for multilateral development banks in that first layer of risk. Two, we need standards and some assurance that what we're buying is based in science, based in sevens, clearly measurable, independently verified, and that the basic market principles that you would expect have been followed, and that it is clear that the benefits are shared with indigenous people and local communities, which is an issue that many investors have had a concern about before. So we believe there's demand, but we need to get on with it and set up some of these principles, which we will launch at Cali.
Thank you very much. Fiquei bem feliz que eu te fiz essa pergunta, viu? Porque acho que era muito
Thank you very much. I'm very happy because I did this question. I believe this was a very good information for us. And I left you for the last place because we are getting out of time here. But I would like to give you this opportunity because we have a very qualified audience here, but also in the internet we have a huge audience. Many people are watching us right now. So if you would have to ask 3 things of how they can help, we can help South Africa to have a G20 that will take the bioeconomy to a new level in this run that we are passing the baton to the other runner. What would be 3 things that you would like to ask that will help a lot South Africa to have success in their program? And then you have to be fast, okay, because I'm in extra time right now.
Great. So maybe I'll limit this to one question, but this has been an incredibly mind-expanding time. But The point that I want to re-emphasize is I believe that we're entering a new paradigm, or we need to enter into a new paradigm of the bioeconomy era, where it's not just the same old economic principles that are applied, but it's looking at sustainability, at circularity, and of benefit sharing, and a whole range of other things. So the question I would ask is, how can you help to design a new system? Not necessarily just a slight nudging or slight deviation. It could be fairly fundamental as well that is going to be required. So the bottom line is that South Africa doesn't have the answers. Brazil also doesn't have the answers, but we all together have some of the answers, and this is what we need to do. We need to come together and create this bioeconomy system that's got the metrics, that's got the finance, it's got the policies and standards, it can be measured, it can be to everyone's satisfaction that we are now heading in the direction. The last point, and this is again not a question, is it's critical that we move fast. We can't do the normal government and multilateral thing of taking 10, 15, 20 years to decide on something. So we need your active participation and help in designing this new bioeconomy system. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Muito obrigado.
Tchau. É isso que eu tenho a dizer. Obrigado.
To conclude, I'm doing something outside of the protocol here, so this is not a government meeting, so it doesn't mean. We have no doubt that all of the merit of the success that you had is here with you. But I would dare to say that I think that without the work done by these organizations here, maybe we wouldn't get to these results with the quality that we arrived. So I believe this is a moment that I want to ask a round of applause to the organizations that had this success. And with that, I want to thank everyone for this panel. Many of the organizations here are working in South Africa, so you can invite them to work with you. So I want to thank everyone for these efforts and all of the organizations that also worked with this group. We don't have the logo of Itaúsa here because we cannot finance anything that I am involved as NatureFinance, but I can guarantee that Itaúsa has helped a lot, and especially in the other works of G20. And I really want to thank you, and I really wanted to mention this because without this whole group, this wouldn't be possible. Thank you very much. Have a great lunch. No, it's not lunch. There is another panel now. I'm sorry. So the next panel with Luca. And let's have a group picture and before leaving the stage. I was doing so well.